Number 10. Cyclops and Wolverine's Schism. Schism was basically Wolverine and Cyclops fighting over ideologies, particularly ideologies surrounding the young mutants' minds that they were subjecting to danger literally all the time. Wolverine believed in a more nurturing parental approach, while Cyclops had the idea to treat these youngins like soldiers. Cyclops' approach is bad enough, but the whole initiation of this fight was another low for the mutant Boy Scout. Cyclops founded Utopia, giving mutants a place to live, but a place that was now being threatened by a new Hellfire Club that attacked a group of young X-Men at a museum opening, taking hostages. Cyclops and Wolverine were racing to get there, but were too slow, so, to Wolverine's horror, Cyclops ordered teenage mutant Oya to de-life all the Hellfire soldiers, which she did successfully. The fight between Cyclops and Wolverine then split the mutant community down the middle. Number 9. X-Men vs. Inhumans. The Inhumans were an offshoot of humanity that were experimented on by the Kree, gaining powers from a process called Terrigenesis, using Terrigen mists. Now it turns out, these mists are basically poisonous to the mutant population, and mutants were hurt when mists were released on Earth. The Inhumans in response felt pretty bad and were all for some kind of peaceful resolution to the issue. But Emma Frost made a whole plan that all the mutants, including the X-Men, agreed to except for Beast, Forge, and Rogue. Emma also basically staged the passing of Cyclops at the hands of Black Bolt of the Inhumans to get the mutants to fight back against the Inhumans, who weren't even trying to fight in the first place, causing a whole war between the two groups. It makes no sense, but that's how it is, I guess. If you guys love mutants and these videos, be sure to drop a quick like on this video. It's all you gotta do to show us your support. Thanks, nerds. Number 8. Danger. While working to upgrade the Danger Room by installing Shi'ar technology one night, the Danger Room spoke to Professor Xavier and asked, "Where am I?" Realizing that the Danger Room had mutated and become alive, but still needing to train his X-Men, Professor Xavier made the choice to just ignore and hide the life form from his X-Men. Not smart, since later, the Danger Room began to control other machines in an attempt to gain a body. After sending an Omega Sentinel to battle the X-Men, the Danger Room convinced a student at the school, Wing, to de-life himself, which resulted in the breaking of its prime directive and the physical manifestation of the being named Danger, taking on a female appearance. After locking all of the students in a nightmarish simulation, Danger battled and defeated the X-Men, then went on to do a whole bunch of much worse things herself.
Coming in at number 7, we have the possessed Shadow Professor X from Earth 6141. Isn't that a mouthful? During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind throughout the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes.
Number 6. The Phoenix 5. In the 2012 crossover event Avengers vs. X-Men, the Cosmic Phoenix Force was coming to Earth, and when it arrived, it was split up into 5, giving our heroes a new problem in the form of the Phoenix 5. The quintet consisted of X-Men veterans including Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magik, and Colossus, who began reshaping the world according to their will until they themselves became a threat. As each member of the 5 fell, those left standing got more and more powerful, leaving Scott and Emma, who were becoming more tyrannical by the minute. To stop the two of them, Professor X was recruited by Magneto, but the cosmic entity had consumed Scott and even basically made him betray Emma Frost to gain more power. After a mental battle between him and Xavier, Scott used his power to actually take the life of his father figure, mentor, and dear friend, becoming the Dark Phoenix until he was defeated by Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch.
Number 5. Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing.
Number 4, Professor X Mind Wipe. Professor X has a history of just impulsively wiping and manipulating people's minds, which never goes well in the long run, but for some reason, he just keeps doing it, even to those he considers friends and colleagues. Reed Richards, with whom Xavier worked with on the Illuminati, which is a whole other bad time, feared for his son's life and built a machine that would take away a mutant's powers. Reed's son, Franklin Richards, is an incredibly powerful being with reality warping abilities and was believed to be a mutant, which he wasn't, but that's another story. Professor X took exception to the machine that Reed built, so he completely wiped away the knowledge of the machine from Richards' mind. He made sure that Richards would never be able to build another one ever again, tampering with the mind of a man he used to call a friend.
Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, known fittingly enough as Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men ever had to face.
Number 2, Beast and TERRA Verde. After the mutant nation of Krakoa was founded with its various different organizations and groups, the former X-Men Hank McCoy was put in charge of the intelligence wing of X-Force, which was the mutant nation's equivalent to something like the CIA, for example. This means that Beast is now one of the shadiest damn mutants you ever did see, and one of the most prominent examples of just how shady he now is comes in his response to an attack from the Republic of Terra Verde. Beast modifies the telefloronic biotech of the country of Terra Verde to take complete control of that country and its people. From there, he used them to seed telefloronic listening devices in embassies and basically used the state as a puppet for intel gathering. Hank transformed the nation into a literal puppet state and robbed its people of their free will. And in at number 1 is the secret of mutant resurrection. This one is gonna split a few people, and I'm kind of even on the fence about this one. Basically, if you don't know, in recent comics, mutants on their new nation of Krakoa have devised a means of resurrecting their own using a group of 5 mutants known, surprisingly, as the 5. Resurrection in comic books happens on an almost absurd basis, but this proven method of consistently bringing back the dead is different, and the mutants are very aware of that fact and even go to great lengths to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. The reason kinda makes sense, as 1, they can't really bring back non-mutants anyways, and 2, the amount of people who would be outraged at the fact that the mutants are allowed to revive themselves but us regular humans have to suffer through all the pain and loss of losing a loved one and can't do anything about it, it would just cause mass outrage and further turn the world against mutants. Still, devising the means for resurrection and not even trying to inform the world? Kinda hella sus.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Kane the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Kane dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Kane embraces the Sidorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. If You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978. So she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course, your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of the thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon.
Number 7. Wolverine. In Wolverine Origins number 29, it's revealed that Wolverine was originally sent to assassinate Xavier as a member of the secret Weapon X experiments. Xavier, obviously able to read Wolverine's mind, sees the attack coming and thwarts it by brainwashing the aggressive Canadian into becoming a member of the X-Men. He removed a bunch of old memories, implanted some new ones, and basically left Wolverine's mind a confused mess. But Xavier managed to get what he wanted, which is a powerful weapon to fight for his cause, so good job, dude.
Number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the Mutant Massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the Horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man.
Coming in at number 5, we have the group known as SINISTER'S 6, and surprisingly, this isn't just a bunch of Spider-Man villains. A group of 6 red-eyed clones of the X-Men working for Mr. Sinister, this villainous group did have a few run-ins with the Wallcrawler, but only during the series known as Spider-Man and the X-Men, so it all works out. These evil clones were initially an intense obstacle preventing the real X-Men from getting closer to Mr. Sinister's schemes, but would ironically eventually be defeated by the same condition that seems to always follow Spider-Man related clone stories, cellular degeneration. Better luck next time, Sinister's 6.
Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the 3rd of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with.
Number 3, Professor X Mind Wipe Mark II. It's not just colleagues that Professor X has manipulated. No sir, not by a long shot. But in Giant Size X-Men number 1, Charles Xavier has to put together a brand new X-Men team thanks to the fact that his original X group is being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we learn later that this new team wasn't the only one, because Professor X already sent out another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were were all horribly killed. Vulcan, Sway, Darwin, and Petra all seem to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit his poor decision making, getting a bunch of mutants killed in action, Charles erases the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including Vulcan's older brother, Cyclops, which came and bit him in the butt when Vulcan turned out to be alive and came for some revenge.
Number 2. Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. Uh-oh. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, you know, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Wild West-themed Xavier Gang. In an alternate Marvel universe that bears an incredible resemblance to America in the 1800s, a band of outlaws known as the Xavier Gang are plaguing a small town in Arizona, with every mutant member of the team being individually mind-controlled by a distant and diabolical version of Professor Charles Xavier. Using this team of the X-Men as puppets made up of both superheroes and supervillains, this Western crook version of Xavier was only defeated once a multiverse-spanning team of X-Men showed up to put an end to his mind-controlling ways. Coming in at number 9, we have the bloodthirsty Vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bitten and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 8, we have perhaps the most infamous X-Men palette swap with Dark Beast. Originally hailing from the alternate timeline known as the Age of Apocalypse, this version of Hank McCoy was a twisted mad scientist working under the tutelage of Mr. Sinister, striving to create the most powerful mutants possible, no matter the cost. Although this messed up future would be prevented by the X-Men, Dark Beast was wily enough to find a way into the main Marvel universe and avoid his existence being erased. Ever since, he's been a persistent thorn in the X-Men's side, and a particular burden on Beast, who would much rather that someone didn't use his genius for evil.
Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's So gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now, of course, there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as...
Coming in at number 6, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel Universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real lasting damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle.
And at number 5 is X-Force. X-Force, the X-Men Black Ops team, Cyclops' own little hit squad. There are more than a few not so great things this sub-team has done. Cyclops forcing X-23 to be on the team, performing assassinations, etc, etc, it's all bad. But after Cyclops disbanded the team, Wolverine kept it going on his own, and they took on a bit of a sinister task when they decided to take out a younger cloned version of Apocalypse to prevent him becoming a threat. This particular assassination almost didn't go through, but then Phantom X just popped the little clone in the head. Yes, it's incredibly messed up, but hey, then he cloned the clone and raised it in a virtual reality to give it all the nurturing it needed to be a good Apocalypse.
Coming in at number 4, we have the twisted Bobby Drake, aka Iceman of the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of the character, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantly through water to lethal effect. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside a furnace, a surefire way to finally melt this evil Iceman.
Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned.
Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Magneto might often be an enemy of the X-Men, but in recent years has allied himself with them more often than not. This version of Magneto, however, is much more cynical and dark than the more complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe. And when he believed his children had been killed by Dr. Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast directly to the head. And finally, coming to our top spot, we have another version of Professor Charles Xavier, or more specifically, the part of his mind known as Onslaught. For years, Professor X has done all he can to achieve peace and prosperity for mutant kind, while not allowing his anger at humanity to get the better of him. But after all this time of psychically repressing every dark and evil thought he ever had, Xavier had made the perfect ticking time bomb. And when he briefly had a mental battle with his best frenemy, Magneto, A portion of Magneto's less held back personality combined with all of the darkness in Xavier's heart and created one of the most dangerous psychic creations of all time, the villain known as Onslaught. A personality made up of the worst possible versions of both Professor X and Magneto, Onslaught is the pinnacle of what can happen when the X-Men go bad.